40.
39.
Number 1.
39.
38.
37.
36.
35.
34.
33.
32.
31.
30.
29.
28.
27.
26.
25.
24.
23.
21.
20.
19.
18.
17. 16.
15.
14.
13.
12. 11.
10.
9. 8.
7. 6. 5.
4.
3.5.
3.
2.
1.
Hey, Rocky, you want to see me pull a show out of my hat? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Good evening and welcome to the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty fresh take on politics. And we got a lot of stuff going on here. This is going to be a great show tonight. We have our guest, Curtis Hill. He's been on several times on our show. He's a long-time victim of our show. And we're going to talk about some fun stuff tonight. Maybe it might make a few people uncomfortable, maybe not. But I think it's stuff we need to talk about. But first, we're going to talk about a new show here that's on the Chateau de Mars Hill Network. That's the Witty Reviews. And we had his first pilot show this evening at 8 o'clock. That's going to start going off at 8 o'clock before our show here. He's going to ramble on for about 50 minutes. And it's quite entertaining. He's very, very good. I mean, for a very first run, it was very nice. And I'm going to bring Steve on here in a second. And we're going to talk about that show a little bit and play his little promotion or his preview for the show. And then we're going to get to it. But we have a lot of stuff that's been going on here lately, just with all the transitioning and things going on, and a lot of shootings over this last weekend in Indianapolis. And it seems like it's a lot of people are on edge a little bit, even though it is the holidays. We got Thanksgiving coming up. It is the holidays, and we should be all thankful and everything. But I think a few people are restless and not really that thankful. So let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and play Steve Whitmer's intro here and bring him on for just a quick minute here and to talk about his show. But here's the preview for this Witty Review show. All right. Hey, Steve, how'd you do on your show there? I mean, I'm the producer on there. See, I pushed the wrong button here. I need a producer. I really do. It's a lot of work for my pea-sized brain.
No, you did a really good job. I was worried about if there was going to be a delay in the time where I'm like, all right, go ahead, hit the clip and whatever, because I really got to figure out that whole OBS thing with the media player, so I don't have to put you in that position again.
Yeah, well, no, it's easy to do. I mean, you just say play the clip and I play it. But the thing is, folks probably don't know that I didn't know we were going to be doing a show till about 4 this evening. And I said, well, send me over some clips. So while he's doing his talking, I'm downloading the clips. And people don't want to see how the sausage made. They just want to see the sausage. But I thought you did a great job on your show. So tell the folks about your show.
Yeah, so I am Steve Whitmer, a.k.a. Slick Witty. And basically the show is just keeping an eye on what's going on with government. I'm mostly focused on central Indiana, Indianapolis, really. I follow the city council meetings and then kind of do reviews on that. And then the other things that might be going on around Indianapolis, say like the Fatal Crash Review Team, there's Vision Zero stuff that's going on, the AI board too. And I try to break it down into little bite-sized bits. So, there's a lot of information out there and people get busy throughout the day and they don't have time to listen to an hour and a half of some guy or multiple people talking.
Yeah, I thought it was quite entertaining. You had me chuckling a couple of times. You will bring it raw. This is definitely you bring it. You don't mince the words, and it's. I think it's going to be a good show. So next week, you're I'm going to be out of town, so this will be a good time to probably talk about our show. I have a BNS special that's going to be next week that I think you will find very interesting. I have interviews with Ray Peck, who's was harassed by the city, and I got Michael Paul Hart. He's a councilman that's trying to fix the BNS system, and then we have some other stories, and it's going to be an interesting thing. It's about I think it's just like a little nice 20-25 minutes show for next week. So I'm not going to be here. So if you're going to have a show next week, you have to have it recorded ASAP, and then we'll put it out there. So anyway, hey Steve, thanks for coming on. If you want to catch the show, it's going to be on the Chateau Days Mars Hill Network. It's on your YouTube page. And if you ever can keep a Twitter account long enough to pay for it, we could live stream to Twitter too. So to the X or whatever.
Those days are gone now.
Yeah, like you're on what, about 17?
Something like that. We'll keep that number silent.
Yeah, that number is golden. So all right, Steve. Well, hey, thanks for coming on, and we look forward to keeping you around on this. I think it was very entertaining, and I think you're onto something here. So
cool. Thanks.
All right, man. All right, see you. All right. Well, hey, check it out. The Chateau de Mars Hill. We got 3 shows. We're still waiting. Maybe Cassie Jackson's going to come back and do something. I don't know. She's taking a vacation, taking a break from things. But Steve's show, it is something. So tonight we have our panel of 3 lovely ladies. My wife being one of those. I feel like Charlie's Angels. I'm Charlie, of course, and they're going to come on. We're going to have a good discussion about this, about what's up. But as I said, next week we will have a recorded little special. I'm quite proud of it. I've been working on it for quite a while. I finally got it all edited up, and it'll just go off there. And Steve will probably have some together. He's pretty good about getting things together. But let's get to our guest. We got Curtis Hill coming on. And Curtis Hill, if you saw the preview to the show, there's a picture of me shaking hands with Curtis when he was Attorney General. I had scheduled a meeting with him, and Curtis didn't really know me. And I'm like, I kid you not, I'm like a half hour late to this thing. And I'm thinking, oh man, he's just going to be no big deal. Come on in, John. What's on your mind? We sat there and talked for a while. And I think if anybody knows me, about 80% of why I'll vote for somebody if you can get a hold of them. And Curtis has always been someone I could get a hold of. If he doesn't answer on the first couple rings, he'll get back with you quickly. And I've always been impressed with that. And I've watched this guy. But there's a thing that we're going to talk about tonight. And, we have this sexual harassment stuff going around with the mayor's office and at the state house with some Democrats. And I'm sure there's some stories that can be told with the Republican side. But this issue is front and foremost in the workplace. It's sexual harassment in the workplace. And tonight, we're going to have Curtis on here. We're going to talk about these things because he had some allegations against him that were, let's put it this way, I don't think they're handling them quite the same way as they handled his. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on Curtis. Curtis, how are you this evening?
Good, John. I was thinking on that Charlie's Angels reference, you're more like Bosley.
Yeah. Dang, I think, that's probably true. As long as I'm in the same set.
You're in the show, man. That's what counts.
Yeah, that's right.
Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you.
I'm good. Now you're not on slow time. You're up north, right? Where's you're not.
I'm in Elkhart. Elkhart's my hometown, so I spend most of my downtime in Elkhart.
Okay, and that's on our time, right? You're not on the. If you get over close, you get over
time, baby, all the way.
Okay, yeah, you get up closer to Chicago. Different story.
Well, I'm not that close to Chicago. I'm about 90 to 100 miles from Chicago.
Okay, yeah. I'm not going to say anything mean about Chicago, so I don't want to have them come down here and get me. Come down to 65 and get me. So, Curtis, hey, you've been on the show 3 or 4 or 5. I mean, a bunch of times. You're definitely a frequent flyer, sure. And I know we've talked about this subject before. And I want to get the ladies on here as soon as possible. But I just was looking at some of the ways that they've handled the latest allegations. Everything's alleged on this so far, but it just doesn't seem like there's a big fuss about it. Let's put it this way: not as big a fuss as when you had some issues. And I just how does that sit with you?
Well, you don't want to see anybody in the crosshairs of the system. And I know Greg Taylor, he's different from me politically, extremely different, although we did get along well. I wish him well. But I think it's very, very strange and maybe not so strange, the level of hypocrisy that we see in this particular instance from the Democrat Party that claims that it has an interest in protecting women in the workplace, and yet I'm not hearing any call outs for resignations. I'm not hearing them even from the Republican Party. It seems like there's some sort of a magic buffer around the General Assembly that they don't come out after their own, and it's very unusual because, as I understand, I don't know anything specifically about the allegations from a factual standpoint. From what I've read, it appears that Senator Taylor has acknowledged some wrongdoing of some sort. So there's not a denial in place. So it would seem that an allegation of harassment involving employees would garner much more acrimony than what it appears to be from the inside of the party. But even from the legislative body, even from the Republicans on the other side, we don't see the circling of the wagons. We don't see the sharks in the water. Everybody's sort of holding their breath, and that level of hypocrisy, I think, doesn't bode well for the General Assembly, because it appears that they talk out of one side of their mouth and something else comes out from the other side.
Yeah, and I do recall when you had some issues that man, they were all up in arms with somebody in their own party. And
what's interesting about that is let's keep in mind the allegations that they seem to imply that there was some type of an employment connection. The allegations against me were at a party at a bar, no staff members of mine, so there's some very interesting dynamics at play when we see this particular situation involving Senator Taylor and employees or staff members, activities surrounding the House business.
Yeah, I do think the glaring thing here is one was in public and the other is in private, and I think that's a big difference. A huge difference, very huge difference, and to see the degree that one was handled and one wasn't has got to raise some questions. And I've always reminded of the great economist Milton Friedman. He says, "Where are we going to find these angels to run our government? I mean, like we're supposed to be perfect people. Yes, you're supposed to be hired to a higher standard, but are you perfect? No, nobody's perfect." So let's go ahead and bring on the panel here. I'm going to bring on, I don't know who to bring on first. I better bring my wife on first, shouldn't I, Curtis?
Good idea.
Yeah, let's try that. Here we go. Lisa, how are you this evening?
I'm good, and I'm so glad that Curtis said it first, because I was going to say Bosley as well, but I didn't want to offend you, John.
Wow,
it's a lot better coming from you, Lisa.
Yeah, just pile on. I got big shoulders.
And John, I do not want to be selfish on this show, but as Curtis was talking, once we get everybody on, if you would humor me and let me go first, just to kind of echo some of what he said, but from some of my personal experience. And y'all can't see my thing down here because my name's covering it up, but it says recovering HR executive.
Oh,
I can't get away with nothing here at the house. There's rules and I got to follow them. It's like crumbs and everything. It's like
firsthand experience
today or something. It's terrible. But
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So this might be a bad idea having my wife on here. She'll tell all my secrets and whatnot, and it's not going to be good. So, but let's go ahead and bring on another fill-in. So Lisa, let's see. Lisa's filling in for Brad. Actually, Brad could be here, but we wanted to have it all female tonight. So Lisa's filling in for Brad. And then Claudia is filling in for Lucy because Lucy had a family emergency and she couldn't. So Claudia is a saint. I sent her a message at about 4 p.m. and she says, "Yeah, I will." People love to be on the Mouthwash, so it's fun. So Claudia, how are you doing this evening?
Good. Thank you. And thank you for having me again. It's always a fun opportunity to join you guys.
Yeah, I think last time you were on with Jeremiah TV Ball, and he had actually a sexual EEOC claim and sexual harassment case. So I would like to get you on here for something fun sometimes, but sometimes these conversations can be a little uncomfortable. But I think
they need to be had.
Yeah, they need to be had. So, and then as Slick Witty talks about Queen T is on here. Let's get this all straightened out here. So we've got that. So yeah, there we go. That's good. I can live with that. And let's do this. Oh, there. Oh, look at that. If I had a producer, I wouldn't even have to mess with that stuff. So Queen T, as Slick Witty refers to you as, how are you this evening? Coming to us from Georgia?
Yes, I'm here in Georgia at my daughter's apartment. Most of the things I have furnished and paid for my own self. The chair in the corner over there, that's from Target.
How does a 5-year-old have their own apartment?
Oh, she's 23 and she knows how to manipulate. This chair we got, I don't know if we got it from Target. I don't know. It's like a $400 chair that comes in like 5 pieces. She hornswoggled me. So look at that.
Did you put it together yourself?
No, actually, one of the things I love most about my daughter is that she has her father's like attention and can put together stuff like IKEA stuff. Actually, I should have stayed married. My husband was so good with IKEA stuff that I really should have drug that out at least another decade or two.
Get good use out of him.
Make it worth your while, right?
It's like, well, you know, you got to do what you can. You got to do what you can.
I know. I wasn't thinking that through.
Yeah, that's good. So, hey, let's get this thing started. I mean, let's go here. And Lisa has lobbied to go first, so I'm gonna let her go first because when I get off the air, I'll be seeing her.
And I'm going to give the disclaimer. None of what I have to share on this show has anything to do with you, John. This is all of my HR executive experience. And so not only do I have experience from an employment oversight perspective, I have experience personally as well, which I'm not going to talk as much about because it really wasn't as dramatic. But the one story that really sticks out to me in my past, and I because I love the place so much still and have some friends there, I'm not going to share where this was, but suffice to say, if you know me, you might be able to figure it out. A very high profile venue in Indianapolis. And this was probably 20 some years ago. And it was the day before a very large event, and an entire department was harassed by a director by him lap dancing the assistants in their chairs, asking some of the coordinators and assistants to come to his office. We found out about it the night before this major event, and the chief of staff calls me at home and says, I need you to come in. We need to interview 20 people today. And because of the high profile of this place and an event, the CEO didn't want to do anything about it. And so what it caused was this ripple effect afterwards. And Curtis, there's a question in here I want to ask you. So because we didn't do anything about it, it ended up turning into all of this festering of feelings, and then more harassment and more potential for harm to the organization because nothing was done. And it ended up costing us settlement money from 3 employees who quit and just left voicemails on my voicemail saying, I quit. I left all my things in the desk. You'll be hearing from my attorney. And so I get sealed documents to put in their files that I can't even see. And it cost the organization a ton of money because they didn't address it right away. But kind of to your point earlier, they just didn't think it was that big of a deal. They just didn't want to address it. And here I am, HR, waving the red flag going, you guys, you not understand. Like, the publicity afterwards could have been even worse than the publicity in that moment. So, Curtis, as an attorney, how do you process that, and how would you advise organizations in that moment? Like, what's the potential for harm, not only right now, but in the future?
Well, the first thing to keep in mind is that not every situation is the same. There are many unique situations, and taking some determinative action of what's appropriate in the workplace and taking action immediately, and it doesn't have to be dramatic action, but it needs to be some aspect of what's appropriate behavior, what's appropriate conduct for the workplace. That's different than what's appropriate outside of the workplace or depending on relationships. The activities between employer and employee has some bearing. The activities between a person and another person with no work connection has a different aspect to it. So what I've seen are circumstances, and we've seen a lot of things in the last several years, some of which have been just really horrible displays of conduct between employer and employee that shouldn't be tolerated. And then what clouds the issue is that we see other behaviors that aren't so clear, depending on the environment, the background, the nature of the relationships. So it's very important to get as much factual information as possible. You know, there's a big difference between the truth of what happened, making something up, or exaggerating. And all of those things have to be taken into the proper context when trying to evaluate what occurs. But the best thing to do is to get as much factual information, not make prejudgments as long as you can hold out, and do your best to make sure that you're getting the proper information. You know, I was a prosecutor for 28 years, and one of the worst things, and keep in mind, for a number of years when I was a deputy prosecutor, I handled sex crimes. I handled crimes against children. And one of the most distressing things about that caseload was the number of occasions where I had cases in which someone did make a false allegation. And it's sometimes very, very difficult to know how to proceed when you have a suspicion that the information that you're getting isn't accurate. So part of it is making sure that you have justice for the alleged victim, but also making sure that you have justice for the alleged perpetrator.
Yeah. So that latter part that you just described is my personal experience, because I was accused of an inappropriate relationship with my president, and it was a disgruntled employee. It was someone we had fired. He had been on a performance improvement plan for months. He needed to be terminated way before he ever was. And he just was like, I'm just going to get these people. And what was hard for me was just, you know, I feel like I live with a certain amount of integrity, and I behave in such a way that, you know, if anyone knows me, they know that's just not going to happen. Plus, I didn't like my president at all. So it was like not even, it would never be a consideration. But
clear,
the fact
right?
that someone, yeah, but the fact that someone was that disgruntled that they would, and it was just, oh my goodness, it was probably 15 line items of things that he accused us of. But then I want to go back to the out of work context. So what a lot of people don't understand is if I'm a customer and I walk into a store and an employee makes crass comments to me about my clothing or my body or whatever, that person could have a claim against that employee, even though they're not an employee of the company. Right?
It depends. It may be inappropriate behavior, but in terms of the context of harassment and who's responsible, you're looking for some type of supervisory capacity or a connection. So certainly the employer-employee relationship at that store is an easy mark. Employer says something, does something to employee. There's a relationship. There's an exchange of power barrier. But a customer coming in, so let's say a male customer comes in and makes some crass comment to a female clerk or employee, may be inappropriate. You may want to get the guy out of the store. It may be a harassment of some sort, but is it the legal context of sexual harassment that we typically look at from an employer-employee standpoint? Probably not. Those are the types of things that cloud the issue. And you know, people are not perfect in their conduct, and so we want to make sure that we hold a very tight, strong line of conduct and behavior in the workplace. But we also have to be reasonable in terms of the interactions of people, not just men and women, even men and women and women, making sure that their behavior and conduct is appropriate outside the workplace.
So Curtis, it sounds like it's on a spectrum, like, you know, making a pass and flirting and then maybe a couple other things and then probably sexual harassment. But I get the part about the power, but like, I mean, is making a pass ever a crime? I guess if you touch somebody, I guess is that where it becomes illegal if
Well,
there's no like
it's
supervisory relationship?
it's not that simple, because that's why I said that every situation involves a review independent of other situations. I mean, for example, battery. Battery is touching someone in a rude, insolent, or angry manner. So if you're in a crowded elevator and you brush up against someone and they didn't want to be touched, well, someone can make the argument, well, that was rude. You brushed up against me and I didn't want to be touched. But what was your intention? You were just walking through the elevator and it was the happenstance of contact. Or you're in a crowded room and you walk up and you shake someone's hand. Well, they didn't want to shake your hand. Well, you know, there's the ways that we behave in public that are normal ways, and there's incidental contact when you're communicating with someone, when you're talking to someone, and those things can be blown out of proportion. You can take that type of conduct as being inappropriate. Someone else may not. And that's where the standard comes in. That's where you have to bring reasonable people in and say, okay, what happened? What was the context of what happened? Where were you all? What were the relationships? And then someone can make a determination. Okay, look, this was really bad conduct. Or, okay, look, this was not conduct that was intended to be XYZ. It was ABC. And that's why we have to make sure that we have as much information on each individual situation as possible. And we have to be fair with the situation based on the facts, not based on the sentiment of the times. One of the problems that we've seen in the last 6-7 years is that many things have been conflated into more than what it was, because people are too afraid to say, well, that's overblown, or that shouldn't have happened. And there's a number of examples that are out in the public that fit that bill. So it's important that we look at each case individually and not try to prejudge it or base it on some other circumstance. So such and such, this happened to blankety blank. So this must be.
Okay, so when does somebody have a habit? When do you say, golly geez, that person has a habit or a consistent past of doing X, Y, and Z?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about.
Because I was reading the article about Senator Taylor, and it said allegations of unwanted physical contact and romantic pursuit of an intern over 8 years. In the article, Taylor did not deny the harassment, may have blurred the lines. I mean,
well, he's saying it may have blurred the lines, indicating that his perception is one thing. The allegation, and I have not seen the specific allegation, but just based on what you've read there, a romantic pursuit over a period of 8 years would suggest a length of time and a development of something that clearly had gone on far longer than it should have gone on. Certainly, if it's true. So I think
allegedly. Sorry,
Yeah, we gotta say allegedly that. It's not. What's one of the things that I've done many different jobs with my ADHD. I'm a licensed minister and I have a master's degree in psychology. And there's 2 classes there's a class that we took in both of those situations. It was called Healthy Boundaries, and that's where we talk about these situations. And I really think that there is certain professions that are more prone to this. So say as a psychologist, you're talking to somebody that's hurt and they look at you as someone who's saving them. So they could easily have more feelings than not. Or if you're a famous person, or say you're a politician, there are people or say you're a Taylor Swift. How many guys do you think will be lining up to have relations with Taylor Swift? It's the healthy boundaries thing. So they sort of warn you about the triggers.
There's a lot of subjectivity in boundaries, and that's part of the problem. And is there an objective standard? Well, probably not. It's a time and circumstance type of situation, and that's what's created the problem. Is, well, what happened? What was the context behind what happened? Not every situation is the same.
One second. To your point, Curtis, about everything's not the same and everything deserves an independent look. The paragraph before that said, the Indiana State Democratic Caucus on Monday re-elected its leader, Senator Greg Taylor of Indianapolis, just hours after the Indy Star reported 3 women have accused Taylor of sexual harassment. That was the 3. So, I mean, like, at one point, do we kind of say, hey, let's chill for a little bit. Let's take a step out of the spotlight, and let's really kind of understand where there may be some missing boundaries, some gaps in the fence.
Well, one of the concerns I would have is that the information that we have is incomplete, because it says 3 women have claimed sexual harassment, but there's no indication of what that actually means, what that is. What is the specific allegation? Is it something that was said? Is it something that was done? Is it a physical contact? Is it a sexual act? There's so many things that come into play, but when you just label it a sexual harassment, that is so vague in the sense that it makes it very difficult for any of us to start making value judgments of whether it's true or what to do about it. So there needs to be an understanding of what are we talking about here? Are we talking about someone being alone in a hotel room making a move? And I don't want to be graphic, but is there some type of graphic understanding of what occurred? Or are we talking about a minor gesture or a gesture that could be reasonably interpreted to mean something else? That's what happened.
Yeah, I think you have a very good point there, because we get the information on articles and on the internet and newspapers, and so they give us very vague and brief, little information, and then it's up to us to disseminate that information and or research and try to find out what exactly happened. Was it just a kind of a body language that was interpreted as sexual harassment? Was there specific language used that was interpreted as sexual harassment? So there's a lot more to it that comes into play, and a lot of factors that need to be considered before making that decision.
Absolutely. I mean, when you see a headline that says such and such groped someone else, okay, stop right there for a minute. What does that mean? And people have in their own mind what grope means, but it doesn't mean what actually happened. And is it too vague to make a determination? And what was the circumstances behind it? So that's exactly the problem that we have. We need to be able to have, to the extent that we're making a value judgment in public anyway, that's a whole nother matter. But whoever's making the determination of what occurred needs to have a factual understanding of what occurred, to make a determination of what's appropriate in the context of the circumstance.
So as I listen to what you're saying, so when these headlines come up, we should probably just dismiss them until we have more information, or until it goes to trial, or until what? I mean, so what happens? I mean,
I don't know that we necessarily dismiss it.
You talked about all of these different things, but if it happens to me, it might be insignificant, but it's important to me. He's stepped inside my boundary. That's important to me. So, I kind of hear, if I'm listening to you, it's like, hey, these are the allegations. It could be one of all of these things. We don't really know what it is. Somebody's reputation's on the line.
Here's the thing. We've heard that there's allegations. We don't know who those allegations have been made to. Is it reported to the police? Is it reported to the HR department of the State House? Who is it actually reported to, and what action is being sought? I'm not aware of any of that information in terms of where this thing is tracking, who complained to who's responsible for taking action. Now, if we take a look at what occurred in the State House last week, you had the story breaking that Senator Taylor was accused by some women of romantic, however it was described. The implication was that they worked for the legislature, or that they were somehow employees. So that put that out there. And then you have the implication, not the implication, the expression from him that his behavior falls below the standard. So there's an acknowledgement or an admission at that point. Now, the next question becomes, what should happen to Senator Taylor based on what we know so far? We don't know everything, but he's suggesting that his behavior has been less than appropriate. He's been accused of behavior that we are suspecting is problematic. So then you take the step of, well, what does the Democratic leadership do? They reelect him to a leadership position without any further concern, apparently. That's, to me, the bigger issue in terms of the Democrat Party taking a position that it's done something or is doing something to protect women in the workplace, particularly in the Indianapolis or the Indiana State House, and suggesting that they say one thing and do another. I recall from other circumstances hearing calls for resignations and things of that nature. I'm not here to say Senator Taylor should resign. That's something that he makes a determination on. But I'm wondering, where are the calls based upon the information that we've seen in the past, based upon the allegations that have been presented thus far, vague as they may be, but they're certainly sufficient enough to suggest there is some smoke here. Does that call upon the Democrat Party to take stronger action than what it's taken? Because it's taken no action. The action it took was to reelect him to lead.
Reelect the guy. So I got a question from the audience here. This is Haas TV Ball. And I don't even know what Title VII is, so maybe somebody could help with this question. What can an employee do if Title VII isn't enforceable? Does anybody know what Title VII is? I thought it was women in sports, but maybe that's Title IX.
That's Title IX.
That's Title IX. I don't know what the specific. I can't. I don't have a.
That's returning clothes if you don't have the tags on them anymore.
You don't have
what? I was like, did I hear that right?
I said,
only Tiffany would say that.
That's returning clothes that don't have the tags on them anymore.
Okay, so while we're trying to figure out what
civil acts,
civil rights.
Yeah. So if it's not a civil rights thing, it's not a sexual harassment thing. I mean, if it's not enforceable, I don't know if
well, sexual harassment is typically, as we grew up with the concept, it was someone being in the workplace that was uncomfortable about things that were being asked of them or done to them. That was kind of the way that it typically was. It has morphed into a lot more undefined types of things. But I always viewed sexual harassment as in the workplace, as opposed to someone of opposite sex being rude to someone else in another setting outside of an employment situation. And that's a matter of that may just be a matter of definitions.
Yeah. So Lisa, you got something there?
Yeah, and I may get myself in trouble a little bit with this.
You own your house, they can sue.
Yeah, nobody ever gets any trouble on this show.
No, I mean, just I think people are not going to agree with kind of my stance on this. But first of all, I think there are a lot of times that people, and I say people, but I probably am leaning more towards women. And let me preface this with, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I have been sexually harassed in the workplace. And so I have an intimate knowledge of all these things. But yet, I still feel like there is a lot of jumping on the bandwagon and saying, well, they're accusing this guy of sexual harassment. I'm going to jump on that. Oh yeah, he said this thing to me, so I'm going to jump on this too. And I don't feel like the Me Too movement did a lot of us that many favors, because I think what it did was open up this Pandora's box of, we're going to accuse everyone of everything, and it's going to get sensationalized. And it's like, Tiffany, you're reading what you're seeing of these accusations. We don't know all the details. And we also don't know the intention of the senator, we don't know all the things. But what I do know is I feel like as a society, we've gotten to a point where we don't just let things go. I mean, we don't have a thick skin. We don't like, why let something offend you? That's where you're taking it on yourself. And the other thing is, if it is that egregious, why did you not say something to that person? Why did you not say no? Why did you let it continue for 8 years?
Well, I watch a lot of special victims unit, and a lot of people shut down when they're in those kinds of stressful situations. But I really do agree with you, Lisa. It sounds like in this day and age, for women to be I'm sorry, for victims to be taken seriously, you've got to disclose, you've got to go to the police, you've got to do all of these things to protect your story, and you have to be willing to tell your story too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, it's kind of like when people talk about abortion in cases of like incest. And, you know, that's tough because that usually means somebody in the family is doing something really bad. But oftentimes those kinds of predators, you know, nobody tells on them because they're family. They don't want to ruin Thanksgiving. But you have to go to the police. You have to press charges. You have to get the criminal justice system involved or nothing changes. That's the thing. It's like nothing changes until something changes.
Well, and even to that case, and I'm going to go along with Lisa and preface that I also am a survivor of domestic violence that I don't ever talk about because there is this construct in society that's something to be ashamed of, and that you don't talk about it because of the family or because the way you were raised or for A, B, and C. And with that said, you know, there are reasons why people go through it for years and not say anything about it. My last recent experience with a neighbor that is a racist that has threatened us, has threatened my family to shoot and to do all these terrible things. We have called the police multiple times. We have made a report and nothing's still not done. Still to this day is not done. So even when you try to get the justice system involved and you follow proper procedure and protocol and report and call the police and they go to this person's house and he refuses to open the door, they can't knock the door down, and then they go about their business and, well, he doesn't want to talk. So there is also the other side of the coin, and I'm not saying this to defend anybody that is Democratic or Republican or whatever. I'm speaking tonight from a women's standpoint, from a human race standpoint, that there are issues that are happening on the daily basis that are not being looked at and that are not being discussed because now society and a lot of groups look at you as, well, we might have a problem with this person. We might not be able to hire them because if this has happened a couple of times, well, we're going to be liable. So then now the victim or you know, the person that has experienced this is furthermore traumatized and you know, experiencing more of the rejection and is not able to move on with their lives. I mean, these are issues that are serious, and I'm glad that we're talking about this conversation tonight, because something needs to be done. But when we want to do something and we report it, there's no follow through from authorities. So what do you do then?
You're very correct, and there's also a backlash that's occurring and has been occurring for a while with women in positions of leadership and authority not being allowed, if you will, to be in a situation where they could make an accusation against a male. There are men who will refuse. You might have a woman who's on your leadership team, and you have to go to an event. You'll choose a man to go to the event instead of a woman because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you may be falsely accused. That's a very real conversation that's going on across America, particularly in the last 8-9 years. And that's a very unfair situation for women to be placed in, that you're a woman and you're moving to the top of your game, and you don't get to go to an event that could be in furtherance of your career because someone is concerned that you might make something up. But given what's happened, it certainly is understandable that people are thinking along those lines. And it becomes the difference between the ability to take decisive action in events that require something to be done versus, as some of our panel have suggested, there are other things and other ways of handling certain other types of things. And so it gets back to my point of understanding exactly what the factual circumstance and the context so that we can get the proper resolution.
Okay.
Hang on, John. So I want to touch on what he just described. So and John, you're going to remember this. Okay. So this didn't involve you, but so I had a situation on my executive team. There were 15 of us and only 3 were women. And our president didn't approach things the way you just described. Oh, I can't invite a woman because I might be accused of something. He didn't care if he was accused of something or not because he knew he was protected. We had word from our corporate office in Atlanta that he must have had something on someone because they were never going to fire him. He'd been there for 38 years. And we knew that everything we experienced, we were going to have to continue to experience if we wanted to keep our jobs and we wanted to stay there. So we go on this trip to Louisville. It was an executive team trip that was a thank you for us reaching all of our goals the previous year. It was only the executive team. And all of the guys, when we walked into dinner the very first night at the Brown Hotel, and we're in this private room, and they are all sloshed. I mean, falling all over themselves drunk. The 3 of us women had to endure the most ridiculous sexual conversation. I kept throwing the red petals of the roses across the table saying, these are your red flags. Are you not getting the hint? Like, you need to knock it off. And finally, I smacked my hand on the table and said, I am not going to continue to sit here and listen to this. This is not appropriate. I'm going to my room. Called John and I said, I'm quitting right now. You need to drive to Louisville and pick me up. I cannot do this anymore. But I tell you all that to say those things continue to happen. My executive vice president in Atlanta told me 3 weeks later, I am sorry about what happened to you, because he heard through the grapevine. And he said, I promise it won't ever happen to you again. Continued to happen. Finally, by the grace of God, I was able to leave. But after I left, I had 5 women reach out to me about helping them with a class action lawsuit. Wow. And I refused to do it because I wanted to move on. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was able to get out. I wasn't physically harmed. It was just crass. It was a very male-dominated environment. They were used to being that way for 50, 60 years. And so I just chose to leave. And not a lot of women choose to do that. And some women,
is true.
Yeah, and some women experience more direct harassment than just having to sit and endure a 2-hour conversation.
You could have done like 9 to 5, like that movie 9 to 5.
Lisa, as I hear you tell that story, I'm not a domestic abuse survivor. I don't think I've ever really been sexually harassed. But when you talk about crass conversation, I'm wondering how many people have I probably offended?
Well, no, Tiffany, when I say crass, this was a president talking about our female CFO and what she had in her suitcase and what she was going to use when she got back to her room and by herself and all. I mean, it was just disgusting. And I like to think as an HR executive, I'm probably one of the most laid back HR people you're ever going to meet. Nothing offends me. And so, I'm always telling people, cool down. They didn't mean it. Da, da, da. This was obnoxiously over the top.
So this was like 10 years ago. And
it was 10 years ago. Let Curtis talk.
That's what you want your HR person to do. You want your HR person to throw the flag and
both of those ladies were texting me when I was on my way to my room saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. We cannot believe we had to endure this. And then it was 4 days of the same thing. So,
that was 10 years ago. Do you think in the past, it's been like, oh, nay, don't say anything. But do you think in present day, it's easier or more people saying it, or is it easier? What would you do? And I'll go across. Let's go Tiffany, Claudia, Lisa, then Curtis. What do you think about that? Have some commentary.
I'm sorry, what was the question? I was reading something in the comments.
Is it easier nowadays to do that, to say something out loud than it was, say, 20 years ago? Is it still jacked up? Or is it
easier? I want to say it's harder nowadays because, it's kind of like what Lisa was saying. I think in a lot of fields, they were so male dominated that they had their behaviors and their pattern of speech that they were used to. So I want to say in 2024, people know when they're being inappropriate. You know when you're saying something, when those inside thoughts are coming out, or when you're
That
leaning
locker room
over
talk
and you're
is
whispering it or something like that. I really think nowadays people know. It's kind of like how everybody knows what racial slurs they can't use out loud, even if it's in a song. I mean, like, people know. People are smarter than we give them credit for.
yeah. So Claudia, what what's your opinion on that?
I believe that that we talk about this maybe a little more, and because we have over the past 100 years, women have joined the workforce in increasing numbers, and it's happening more. On the same token, we have more media outlets, and so we have more sources to receive information and to provide information, whether accurate or not. So we can, we're able to hear more about it. Does that mean that everyone is, sharing their experiences? No, I think there are still women and maybe men that are going through situations like this, and because it's such a it's a touchy subject to discuss and to look into, whether it's at work or at an event or whatever, that we have to consider so many factors, and what is the context, and what was it, how was it really said, or what words were used, or did you actually have physical contact, that it's difficult to determine whether it has happened. And then you have another person or a group of people determining whether they consider, per their standard, if that was in fact sexual harassment. So, I think that of course there's still a lot to be fixed and touched on, but I think that somebody on the comments were talking about Title VII, and I believe that that's under the Civil Rights Act, that it's under the Civil Rights Commission. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it talks about Civil Rights Act employers with less than 15 employees aren't protected. You're sort of a smaller business is not protected apparently. So with that. So,
that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. But I think that sounds like something that has been experienced.
And what I was going to say about that, and I was getting confused with what was said, but it should be under the Human Rights Commission when something like that happens at work, and the Human Rights Commission can follow through. Is that accurate? Can investigate if the person is not able to.
So what I think I'm hearing you say here is that the name of this show is "What is Sexual Harassment?" pretty much, and so far we haven't really put our finger on it. It's either this or that or other things. So that just adds another layer to my question of, so what is sexual harassment, and is it easier these days to talk about that or not?
So I don't want to take over for Claudia. Did you have anything else?
No.
I think it's still clear as mud. Because I've always perceived sexual harassment as being my perspective of something that has happened to me. Okay. So, but then when I started in my last HR role, I had a gal come and complain to me because the maintenance man had a girly calendar on his wall in his office, and she thought that was sexual harassment. Now,
he's the maintenance man.
Yeah, and his office was like a block away practically. No one ever went into his office.
She was just mad because she wasn't
there. But it's eye of the beholder. It offended her, but it wasn't directed at her. So, so there are those conversations. Also, I feel like it's such an individual thing. Like, people have to feel comfortable bringing it up or talking about it or sharing their experience, and not a lot of people are. I kind of feel like we're still where we were 20 years ago. Curtis, I wanted to ask you if you can recall when you started hearing about sexual harassment policies being put in place, because when I heard about the city of Indianapolis not having an official training program or policy or no whistleblower process, I was implementing those things back in 2000.
Well,
And-
these things have been to answer to the short answer to that question is it's been 20, 30 years ago. I mean, for years and years, we've been hearing about policies. The reality is it's all bullshit. They put these so-called policies together, or we're going to come out with a harassment policy that's going to clean us all up. And what that does is that just placates the public that we've done something, and then the next allegation comes along. As far as it goes, there are bright line sexual harassment issues. Lisa, the thing that you described, in my view, is clearly a bright line sexual harassment. Employer clearly making comments and statements that are gross and offensive to staffers. That's an easy answer. My concern about the ease of which people are now making the allegations is that the allegations can be used as a weapon in inappropriate circumstances and defeat the real power of sexual harassment to be effective. If you have it abused, if you have the process abused by allegations that don't warrant that type of reaction, it creates a dynamic where no one wins. And I think that's what's been happening as of late. Allegations, we live in an environment in a time now where you are guilty by accusation. We would hear believe the women. Believe the women. Well, I'm sorry, this is the United States of America, and our justice system doesn't say simply believe someone. It says proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We still have to be, allegations have to be pled out, evidence has to be presented, that evidence has to reach a certain level to make a factual determination when you have a dispute between two parties. When we have a standard that's thrust upon us in the last few years that says, well, this allegation has been made and we need to make sure we believe the women. Well, as I said, I've already told you, as a prosecutor, I had several cases that I had in my career where I had people who lied to the police, who lied to the prosecutor, who lied to the judge, and we would have to ferret that out. The last thing I want to do is send a person to jail for 30 years on a lie. And yet we would see that happen. So yes, people can, I think it's easier for people to weaponize the allegation of sexual harassment, which in turn makes it more difficult for the people who have actually been sexually harassed to come forward, because they don't necessarily want to be lumped in with these empty allegations.
Definitely waters things down.
Curtis, that is why I have always had such respect for you and have admired you for the way you have carried yourself throughout all of this kind of thing. I wish more people would really listen and grasp everything that you're saying about I am hurt by the fact that my gender has taken this as, like you said, weaponizing this kind of thing. I mean, it just really hurts my heart, because I lived it from both perspectives, but I also know what the false allegations are like. And I really respect you for how you've handled all of this. I think that's one of the reasons from the very get-go when, John started reaching out to you and stuff, I'm like, I really like this guy, and I might not be of the majority when it comes to the way I feel about all this. But I think sometimes we have to say the hard things and not agree with everybody all the time.
We do have to say the hard things, and it's difficult to make these statements because we don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. But here's the reality: if we're grown-up people, if I say something to Tiffany and Tiffany's uncomfortable, Tiffany, tell me I made you feel uncomfortable. Don't walk away feeling blue and then wait 6 months, 8 months later and say,
And tell the
well,
Indy Star.
let me tell you.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the way that people need to deal with each other. And we're being taught not to do that. We're being taught to oh no, you couldn't do that at the time. And I have to back up. I mean, I get frustrated to talk about this because there are so many different levels. There's the allegation of somebody said something, somebody did something. Where was it done? I mean, all of those things matter. All of those things matter in terms of trying to get to the root of the thing. And Claudia, to your point, having been in the justice system, few things worse than someone who makes a credible allegation about something happening and not having the evidence to be able to do something about it. Because something can happen as a matter of fact, but a third-party investigator, like a police officer or a prosecutor, is limited to the information that they have access to. And so when you have a he said, she said about what happened, it becomes very, very difficult to be able to ascertain what's the truth in that matter, particularly if they're completely opposed. I say black, you say white.
I say brown.
That? And
I say potato. So
and that's the nature of the problem is how do we get to those answers? Well, we do the best job that we can, and it's not perfect. We do the best job that we can. We try to be subjective, but we have to be fair, and we have to be fair to both sides. And that would be the thing that I would encourage anyone is to really examine what the objective is in pursuing the claim.
But
So
also,
do you believe
too,
that
it sounds
Taylor
like
having?
I was just going to say, it sounds like when we see these things in like the newspaper, they almost need to have like a column, a little checklist, like this has been verified by 2 sources, and we've got a statement from both sides, and this is the crime that we believe. And
the newspaper doesn't care. The newspaper wants to crush whoever they can crush.
I know,
I know.
but the thing is that like you want people to use common sense, but if common sense was common, we would call it something else. But the thing is that like how do you take like these allegations that float out there that damage people's reputations, and how do we say, hey, Indy Star, that's a great article, but can you answer 5 questions in the margin before you put it out there? Like you've spoken to both sides. This is fair, balanced, or blah blah blah. Like I feel like before you put those things in print, you probably need to answer 5 big questions up front before you let it go.
Yeah, we call that good. We call that good reporting. We call that good.
They call that responsible journalism, and sometimes we don't see responsible journalism, particularly in the Indianapolis Star, among others. That would be the correct way to do it, is to not go forward on spurless information when you can, but they're able to get away with that.
And that's the crime right there.
Well,
and whenever they talk about me, they use the most horrible picture ever. I just want to say that.
Well, the crime is also that the people who read this stuff don't educate themselves on how to read it, how to understand what you're reading. You see an allegation, as I said, even in Taylor's case, our minds are racing off into imagination land about what he must have done.
What did he do?
But we don't have a clue.
Yeah, we don't have a clue.
We really don't know and I'm not saying what he did. We don't even really know what the allegation is. And if we heard the allegation, maybe we would differ in terms of what we think the response ought to be.
Yeah.
Oh, he did what?
So, Claudia, I'm going to give you the last word. We're going to circle these wagons and head on back to the chuck wagon or whatever. I don't know what kind of saying that.
No,
beans and biscuits.
Yeah. Cookie.
I think that there are both sides to the story, and that both sides need to be considered seriously. I think that there is much more discussion to be had about this topic, and I think that we need to start taking it more seriously. And when something comes up once, then you let it go, and then twice you start thinking about whether it's there's some truth to it, and then the third time, then when do you start investigating, or when do you start taking that seriously?
Yeah.
At what point does it become an actual allegation of at what point do you take someone seriously, or do you say you know, you need to provide me with footage of your security cameras.
Well, we
What
can't.
did you do 100 years ago when there was no
But Claudia,
video?
we can't do that. The one thing that we can't do is we can't put an overburdensome responsibility on victims of crime. I mean, I was a prosecutor for a number of years, and I fought for victims' rights. We want to make sure that we don't require an unreasonable amount of information. So even if it happens once, if it's the wrong thing that happens once, we want to do as good a job as we can to take decisive action. What we need to do is make sure that we understand what are things that we need to move forward on and what are things that we need to move away from.
Yep, that's good. Hey,
John,
oh,
I just want to say the quote. Okay, so we've talked about both sides of this. We've talked about the victims. We've talked about those that are supposedly the perpetrators, whatever. So for those that we don't know, let's talk about the senator. We have a quote hanging in our bathroom. And this is how I had to think through my process when this guy was accusing me of all this crazy stuff. Live in such a way that should anyone speak badly of you, no one would believe it.
Right. And to Claudia's point about organizations, there has to be zero tolerance.
Yeah.
You know, that's where we say, you know, we have zero tolerance, and you being accused of this and saying that perhaps some lines were, we've got zero tolerance. So you're going to have to sit on the sidelines right now. We're going to work this out. I mean, I think that, you know, when people say no tolerance for this, like, you know, I feel like sometimes maybe it's easier with DUIs that people can be like, oh, zero tolerance. Like, oh my gosh, you know, like you were pulled over, you did a breathalyzer and this and that, and, you know, zero tolerance. And, you know, I feel like these allegations, I feel like, you know, people who make these allegations, you know, people take them very seriously, and one false allegation ruins it for everybody else. So don't do that. That's not a good way to get back at people. But for victims to come forward, we have to believe them, and our organizations need to hold people accountable, and zero tolerance. One allegation is one too many. And, you know, we're going to fully investigate. And on either side, if we find out, you know, you've made false allegations, you're going to be punished to the full extent possible. And if you are harassing people, you know, the same is going to happen. And, you know, we talk about like workplaces. And when I think about like sexual harassment in the workplace, racism in the workplace, and, you know, I think about the time I spent in the military, I was like, damn, none of that stuff ever happened. You know, like, you know, I was never brought in on anything, or none of that, nothing happened to the people who worked for me. And that's why we need diversity in leadership, because I'm not going to sit around doing racist stuff at work. I mean, how? Why would I do that? I'm not going to sexually harass people who work for me, because you're not supposed to do that. I was also an officer in the military, and we're held to a much higher standard. Fraternization, adultery, you know, those kinds of things. I mean, they're punishable under the UCMJ. That means you have to make big rocks into smaller rocks. But, you know, but that's how we need people to be. You know, being a supervisor, being a boss is an honor. And it's your job to create a workplace where people can flourish and you can make money and achieve the bottom line of the organization. And any behaviors that are not aligned to that are not tolerated. There's zero tolerance.
Yep.
And unfortunately, at the end of the day, like someone said earlier, policies become bullshit.
Yeah, they are. I was in corporate America.
Right. No, but I was just thinking, you know, at the end of the day, policies just end up being a piece of paper.
But a policy is a piece of paper until somebody makes an allegation. So I think about the time that I spent in the corporate world.
No. At the end of the day, can become more important for the organization or the company that the staff or the employees are working for, that their reputation is more important. So they brush it under the rug. They sit with the employee and say, you know, I don't believe that but
there's two parts of that. There's two parts of that. There's the allegation between the employees, and then there's the corporate culture. And sometimes corporate culture allows for things to happen. So, you know, I was going to tell you about when I'd go on these work trips. And so let's say you're at a conference, and a conference goes from, you know, like 8 to 5, and then maybe there's a dinner, and then there's drinks at the bar. Everything after dinner does not need to happen, because corporate America, some of these jobs will have people sitting there next to their kryptonite waiting for them to crumble. You know, a lot of the social interactions that happen between people after 7:30 probably shouldn't happen on work trip. You know, and it's like people have these corporate cultures where, you know, I want to know more about you. You know, I really want to like you. You know, you don't need to like me. You need to know that I'm going to do my job. I'm going to be there when you need me. And my customers are going to be delighted. Whether or not you like me is a luxury. I'm here to work. I'm not here to make friends. And, you know, I also, when I worked in the corporate world, I didn't want, you know, my coworkers on my Facebook page. Why? You know, can't I have an outlet of my own? You know, I'm not accountable to you with what I do after 5 p.m. So I just think that in so many worlds, there's the bleeding of what's professional and what is personal. And when we get into that space, that's where things become very, very uncomfortable. And we are asking employees, employers, bosses, supervisors, HR directors, people have to be of a higher quality.
Yeah, sounds like the healthy boundaries class is what
But it's beyond that. You know what? First off, if I have to teach you about your boundaries, you have bad boundaries.
Well,
But
like,
if I have to teach you, if we need to talk about how you need to treat your employees, okay, we can do that once because you may not have been a boss before. But some of it's what's appropriate. Like talk to your employees like you talk to your kids or you talk to your mom. You know, talk to them like they're nuns. You know, people don't need a whole lot of your personality at work. And I have a lot of personality. I'm self-employed, but I think that when you can put your organization in a place where they're cutting checks to people because of your behavior, you really have to.
Yeah, that's when you got to think about it. That's
Well,
when you
and I think one thing to add on the circumstance with Senator Taylor, I think based upon the allegations that we know of, and more importantly on his comments that he has blurred the lines, it would certainly seem that the Democrat Party or the Democrats and the Democratic caucus in the Senate would take a more definitive action based upon his acknowledgement of
wrongdoing with staffers. And that's the culture.
That
is the culture
that has continued on. That they claim they're going to claim after this that they fixed it, and it's going to happen again, and they'll claim that they fixed it, and they'll claim that they fixed it. They've never fixed it.
Classes.
They put out a program. They give you a little computer program and let you push the button. Is this appropriate? Is that appropriate? Yes or no? That all looks good, but it's not real. It's not real. And the people who work as staff assistants in the State House deserve more, deserve better. People who work in any environment deserve more and deserve better. And we need to be able to count on the system working correctly for those who are properly accused and those who are falsely accused. It is a very subjective circumstance, very, very contextual in terms of what occurs. And we have to make sure that everyone is treated fairly in the process so that the right result happens as often as possible.
Amen.
All right.
Amen to that.
That's a good thing to end on right there. And
Yes.
we're not going to subject anybody on here. We got too many new people to conspiracy theory. Plus,
can
Lucy's
I ask
not here.
Curtis a question?
One more question, Tiffany.
Just one question. Curtis, we are completely changing gears. Just
Changing gears.
It's not the policy.
Completely changing gears. And so one of the questions that I will ask Governor-elect Braun, but I wanted to ask you, during the primary, when you were on stage with everyone else who's running for governor, and people would talk about their ideas that would make Indiana better and what they were going to do, were there any ideas that you heard that you thought were really good and you would have done when you became governor?
That I heard from someone else?
Yeah, from anybody else who was running during the primary.
I think I had a lot of good ideas myself.
Of course you did. You had, I take that back. Like you had the bestest ideas.
I had the bestest. Well, I still go back. I guess I would put it this way. From my recollection of the campaign, I heard a lot of similarities amongst the people that were running that were, I think, typical things that you would hear from various candidates. I think one of the things that sticks out was something that I said about doing away with DEI, and it's being proven to be the right course. We have colleges and businesses. I think I read something today that Walmart is backing away from some of their DEI policies because they're starting to understand and recognize that that's not the path to racial reconciliation. It's creating a bigger nightmare situation than warranted. One of the things that I had said was that we would end it on day one.
And we would start the Office of Opportunity and Excellence.
Yes.
See, I was listening. See,
and there's a big difference between between an Office of Diversity and an Office of Opportunity, and creating opportunity for all, not just opportunity for some.
Yes,
I think that's very important. So I'm waiting to see what the new administration does. I'm hoping that we'll see some excitement. I'm hoping that it will move in a stronger direction than what the previous administration did, which I think didn't do well at all. But we'll see, and we'll pray for a good result.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Not even the white papers about like free adoption, like nothing. No.
I think free adoption is.
Be careful.
It sounds okay. I quite frankly, I didn't think that free adoption. I don't think that that's one of the major problems that we have in the state. I think we want to encourage adoption. I think people who want to adopt have plenty of opportunity to adopt. We have lots of people who go overseas to adopt, and unfortunately, I think there's plenty of kids here locally that we can adopt. I don't think that free adoption is necessarily a bad thing. I just didn't think it solved a major problem that we had in Indiana.
No, we have record amount of over 900 kids in foster homes, and that's rising. So
if you want a kid, you get one.
Yeah, there's out there. So okay, Tiffany, you're making this into more than one show. We did such a good job packing it together.
We haven't had Curtis on the show in a while. I mean, like
I know.
That question was festering. I was listening, Curtis. The Office of Opportunity and Excellence. I mean, I love it. So we had Micah on the show a couple weeks ago, and he said that he was up in Gary, and he was talking to this brown man, and he was like, what can you do for like my child? Like we're here in these Gary schools, and my child can't do this, and we don't have that. Like, what can you do? What are you going to do? And I thought about it, when you frame it up in terms of opportunity and excellence, let's look at what you need. Let's see what we can do. Let's point everybody in the same direction so that you can have the same kind of experience for your child that somebody else is going to have if they make, 3 times as much money as you.
Wait, and what we do to follow that up, what I love about what's going on in Washington, D.C. now is President Trump indicating that he's going to do away with the Department of Education. That's one of the things that we did talk about during my campaign, is to eliminate the Department of Education and the strings that are attached to the federal dollars that create responsibility for school districts like in Lake County to do things that don't matter, instead of being able to be free enough to do things that do. So imagine you get rid of the federal dollars and the federal strings. Now you take a look at the kids that you have and you say, what can we do from a curriculum standpoint? What can we challenge our kids with? Maybe we can do a program where we have first graders have a foreign language, and then come back in the 4th grade to have and be introduced to their second foreign language. What does that do for these kids? That prepares them for a world economy. It gets their brains working like musical instruments do. I mean, that's what we can do when we set the federal government aside and the requirements that they have, and actually allow local school districts to focus and energize themselves on what they can do for their kids. But with that power comes responsibility. That means that the local school boards are going to be responsible, as they should be, for what actions they take. And that's exactly what needs to happen for those little brown kids, those little yellow kids, those little white kids. They need to have concentrated focus on school boards identifying ways to improve the academic performance and excellence of all their children.
Wow. All right. That is it. No more questions. No more questions. Okay. The questions are closed now. Don't make me mute some things there. So Curtis, hey, thanks. As always, this hour has flown by to be an hour and 20 minutes. You always run us up.
Curtis, we should come back and we should all talk about education. That would be fun. What'd I say?
Anytime.
What'd I do? John acts like he's buying this time on air and that we're wedged between like Dukes of Hazzard and Dynasty or something.
It's gonna cost us more.
I gotta watch All in the Family. Come on. So hey, Edith, give me a sandwich. Okay, well, thanks, Curtis, for coming on.
Thank you,
Claudia. And Lisa, our special extra guests here tonight. It's been quite fun, and it worked out as well like I thought it would. We had some very good experience and expertise on here. And Curtis, you're always a gentleman and did a very good job answering the questions. And we will definitely have you. Even the extra questions that you weren't even
what I do
on there. So I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. And next week, we will have a recorded business, neighborhood, and services or code enforcement or permit department. You'll want to tune in and see that. So
December 3rd, we don't have a show.
we don't have a show. I got a recording because I'm going to be in Florida. You know, it's going to be like 17 degrees up here, and I'll be down in Florida, all in 70-degree weather and whatnot.
So I'm in Georgia, and there's a freeze warning at my daughter's apartment because the temperature might go under 60 degrees.
Somebody left the freezer door open or something. That's what it was.
I saw somebody walking around today with like a red puffy coat on and a white toboggan, and I was like, "Oh my God! I hope
they don't have their wintertime blood in, like, you know, blood's not thick enough." Okay, well, don't melt down there in Georgia. And hey, thanks everybody for coming on.
By the pool.
Yeah, bye. Say bye, Tiffany. Say bye.
Bye.
Yeah.